the emerging era of disasters that climate change is ushering in will involve a number of characteristics. One will be that we're going to see a steady increase in what we call slow onset hazards, like the temperature continuing to rise and sea level continuing to rise. So these slow onset hazards that will increasingly be happening simultaneously with sudden onset hazards like bushfire, cyclone threat, storm surge, extreme flooding. So that a community that maybe has weathered one of these hazards will be overwhelmed by subsequent ones that hit because they won't have time to recover.
Driving on roads, turning on a tap for water, turning on a light switch so that we can have light to work in. These things we don't consider because infrastructure works so well. But during severe weather events, we feel the lack of that infrastructure. And if we do just a little bit more work at the front end, we can ensure that infrastructure will operate in more extreme circumstances.
Prevention is better than cure in every case. And we look at reducing risks, whereas our emergency agencies have been grown up from a risk response perspective. So it's kind of this question of how do we take our emergency agencies from a risk response to a disaster risk reduction.
It's not just about individuals and neighbourhoods, that's really important, but it's also about the system that sits around disaster resilience, what governments can do, what land use planning can do, what emergency services can do, what economics and social capital does for building disaster resilience.
It really takes a whole of community approach. And so that means when we're talking about a resilient community, we're talking about all aspects of the community. We're talking about community organisations, households, the business community, the agricultural community. It's a whole community approach.
And so it's important to educate with that mindset and help people to understand that, well, despite the different perception or cultural orientation, you do have to prepare. And this is what we consider riskier, and we do have to prepare for it.
So we often talk about protecting lives is the primary thing, and that's important, obviously. We don't want anyone to die. But then beyond that, it's that next step is like, okay, if you survive, what do you survive to, and how is your life afterwards? So I suppose it's really sort of about understanding that and making sure that also becomes a driver for what we do.